Willa Emerson stabbed her fork into a piece of dry chicken while the wedding around her exploded in laughter, clinking glasses, and champagne-fueled cheers. She sat alone at table 9, right next to the dance floor, invisible in a sea of sequins and satin. The worst part. She didn't even know the bride or groom that well. Her roommate had dragged her here last minute as her plus one, then promptly disappeared with the best man. Now Willa was stuck in a dress she didn't even like, nursing her second glass of wine, trying not to look like the only single person in the building. Just as she reached for the bread basket, a voice beside her made her freeze. "This seat taken." She looked up and saw him, tall. Broad shoulders wrapped in a perfectly tailored tux. Dark brown hair falling just above his eyes that were a ridiculous mix of green and gold, framed by thick lashes that were unfair on a man. "Nope," she said, too quickly. "Go for it." The man pulled out the chair and sat beside her like he belonged there, like this wasn't a table clearly meant for the overflow guests no one knew what to do with. "I'm Nash Donovan, groomsman, and trying to escape an overly affectionate aunt who keeps grabbing my face and telling me I used to be chubby." Willa coughed a laugh. "Willa Emerson, not a groomsman. And avoiding the fact that I don't know anyone here except the girl who ditched me for a guy in a vest." He grinned. "Sounds like we're in the same boat." She blinked. Nash Donovan, the name sounded familiar. Maybe he was someone important. "So, Willa Emerson," he said, turning toward her, his knee accidentally brushing hers under the table, warm, solid. "How do you know the happy couple?" "I don't. My roommate's cousin is the bride. She got me in last minute." "Gatecrasher," he teased. "Unwilling gatecrasher. I'm just here for the cake." That made him laugh, and she couldn't help but smile. He had one of those rare, real laughs, the kind that made you feel like he wasn't faking anything. As the music picked up, couples drifted to the dance floor. Nash didn't move. Instead, he leaned in slightly, voice low. "You don't really strike me as someone who likes sitting on the sidelines." Willa raised an eyebrow. "You don't know me, true, but I'd like to." She blinked. "You're very direct." "Is that bad?" "No," she said slowly. "It's just rare." The DJ announced the bouquet toss. Willa inwardly groaned. "Want to get some air?" Nash asked, already rising. She hesitated for a second, but then stood. "Yes. Please?" They walked out onto the terrace, the night air cool against her skin. String lights lined the railing, casting a soft golden glow. Below them, the city sparkled. "Much better," she said, exhaling. Nash leaned on the railing beside her. "You looked kind of sad when I first saw you." She blinked. "That's blunt," he shrugged. "I notice things." "Well, I wasn't sad, just over it." "Over what?" "This kind of thing. People pretending everything is perfect. Everyone coupled up like it means they're better at life." "Is that why you sat alone?" She paused. "Honestly, I didn't want to be a burden to anyone. I've learned it's easier to just stay out of the way." He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. "That's a load of crap," she laughed. "What?" "I don't know who convinced you that you're in the way, but they were wrong." Willa looked away, swallowing. "You don't know me." "Not yet," he said, watching her. "But I'd like to." The way he said it, without any pressure, without trying to be charming, it made something shift in her chest. "You're intense," she said quietly. "Only when I mean something." They stood in silence for a while. The music from inside filtered out softly, laughter and clinking glasses in the background. She turned to him. "So what's your story, Nash Donovan? You don't seem like someone who hangs out at weddings alone either." He smirked. No, not smirked, smiled, but it was the kind of smile that said he was choosing his words carefully. "I'm here because the groom is my college best friend. I fly in where the tux make the toast, smile for the pictures. Then disappear." "Disappear where?" He hesitated for a second, then said, "New York. I run a few companies there." "Oh," she blinked. "So you're successful?" He laughed, but didn't elaborate. "I do all right." She narrowed her eyes. "You're definitely hiding something." "Not hiding," he said simply. "Just prefer to show people who I am before they Google me." She stared at him. "Okay, now I'm dying to Google you." "Don't," he said, and he was smiling, but there was something serious in his tone too. Just, let me be Nash for now. All right, she said. Nash it is. They stood there a little longer, closer than before. Her shoulder brushed his arm and neither of them moved away. You want to dance? He asked suddenly. She blinked. Now, why not? I don't know. I'm not a great dancer. I am, he said and held out his hand. She stared at it for a second, then slid her hand into his. He led her inside, weaving through the crowd until they were on the dance floor. The music had slowed, and as he pulled her close, Willa felt her breath catch. He wasn't just handsome, he wasn't just charming. There was something else in the way he held her, in the way his hand settled gently on her waist like it belonged there. You're full of surprises, Nash. You have no idea, he murmured. And in that moment, Willa forgot she'd come to this wedding alone, because suddenly, she wasn't any more. Willa adjusted the strap of her shoes as she stepped onto the marble floor of the hotel's grand lobby, blinking against the sudden brightness. The wedding had begun to wind down, and she'd said a quick goodbye to the bride's cousin, who barely remembered inviting her at all. Now, the warmth of the night air had given way to a crisp chill, and her ride-share app refused to load. She glanced around, debating whether to brave the cold walk to the main road. Before she could make up her mind, a familiar voice stopped her. You're not walking home in those heels, are you? She turned to find Nash standing beside a sleek black car, one hand casually resting on the open door. His tux jacket was unbuttoned now, revealing a flash of crisp white shirt and a loosened bow tie. He looked effortless. Depends, she said, crossing her arms. Are you offering a ride or just judging my life choices? He opened the passenger door wider. Offering. Judging comes later, Willa hesitated. You don't even know where I live. Give me an address, I'll get you there. She stepped closer, watching his face for any hint of hesitation. There wasn't any. I live in West Chelsea. I know the area, he said. Get in. The interior of the car was too clean, too quiet. Not even a lingering scent of cologne or fast food, just leather and silence. She buckled in, suddenly aware of how close they were in the confined space. Nash pulled away from the curb smoothly, merging into the soft glow of city traffic. After a few blocks of silence, he spoke. You didn't strike me as someone who'd live in Manhattan. Why not? She asked, arching a brow. You seem like someone who'd prefer quiet, space, maybe a porch swing, she grinned. I take that as a compliment. It was. Willa looked out the window, watching the city blur past. I rent a studio above a bakery. It smells like cinnamon rolls in the morning and burnt sugar at night. That sounds like the start of a novel. Only if the heroine has student loans and a broken water heater. Nash laughed, but didn't press. The silence that followed was comfortable until she turned to him. What do you actually do, Nash? He didn't answer right away. The car slowed at her red light and his hands tightened on the wheel just slightly. I own a few companies, mostly in tech and logistics. She studied him. You said that like you were reciting a grocery list. I've found that when people know the specifics, they start treating you differently. Is that why you didn't want me to Google you? He glanced at her, then back to the road. Most people hear Donovan and assume things. The suits. The headlines, the Forbes list nonsense. Her eyes widened. Wait, as in? Yeah, that family. She leaned back against the seat, exhaling. So you're not just successful, you're Donovan Industries successful. Does it change anything? I haven't decided yet, she said honestly. That made him glance at her again, this time with something softer in his eyes. I like that you're honest. I like that you didn't bring any of that up the first time we talked. Would it have mattered? I think I would have wondered if you were bored and slumming it with the girl at the loser table. He pulled into a quiet street lined with brownstones, then parked in front of a brick building with a narrow staircase leading up to a green door. This it? He asked. She nodded. Top floor. He didn't make a move to leave, but he also didn't drive away. Willa looked at her hands. You know, I didn't expect to have a decent conversation tonight. Let alone one that lasted longer than 3 minutes. Guess I ruined your low expectations completely. They sat in silence again. Then she reached for the door handle. Thanks for the ride. Willa, she paused, hand still on the door. I have a dinner tomorrow, he said. It's boring, corporate, and probably filled with people who'll talk about nothing for 2 hours. She tilted her head. Sounds thrilling. I'd like you to come, make it less of a punishment. She didn't answer right away. Is this one of those things where I'll show up and suddenly everyone's in couture and I'm standing there in a department store dress? There'll be a dress. My driver can bring it by tomorrow morning. Your size. She stared at him. Do you always just offer women gowns and chauffeurs after one dance? No, he said. Just this one. She laughed once, but it caught in her throat. You're impossible. Only if you say no. She looked down at her lap, then back at him. All right. But if I hate it, you owe me cinnamon rolls. Deal. She opened the door and stepped out. Halfway up the stairs, she turned to find him still watching her. She gave a small wave, then disappeared inside. The next morning, a white garment bag hung from her door, accompanied by a pale envelope. Inside was a handwritten note, for the only woman at the wedding who didn't pretend to be someone else. And beneath that, a name, Nash. Willa stared at the flowing letters, heart thudding. This was no ordinary dinner, and Nash Donovan was no ordinary man. The driver arrived just past noon, an older man in a slate gray suit who introduced himself as Marcus and handed her a small black box along with the garment bag. Willa stood in the doorway of her building barefoot, clutching the items like she'd stepped into a different life by accident. Inside, she laid the dress across her bed and opened the box. Inside, nestled against velvet, shimmered a delicate necklace, rose gold, with a single teardrop diamond suspended in the center. She stared at it for a long time before gently closing the lid. By evening, she was slipping into the dress, a deep indigo gown that hugged her waist and fell in graceful folds to her ankles. The neckline swept across her collarbone, elegant without being showy. Whoever chose it had understood her instantly. When Marcus opened the door to the car, she tried to act like she'd done this before. But the moment she stepped into the back seat, she realized the interior was nothing like the sleek car from the night before. This was luxury reborn: plush seats, ambient lighting, even a chilled bottle of water in a crystal holder. The building they pulled up to was a modern fortress of glass and steel, seated along the river, its entrance flanked by tall hedges and a single valet in a gloved uniform. She stepped out, heart pounding, and was immediately greeted by Nash. He wore a tailored navy suit this time, and as his eyes swept over her, something in his expression shifted. You look like trouble, he said, offering his arm. I was aiming for mildly impressive, she replied, slipping her hand through his. He guided her through the doors, past a sleek lobby, and into a private elevator. As it began to rise, he leaned against the mirrored wall and watched her. Just so you're prepared, he said. This dinner isn't about me. She turned to him. Then who is it about? My sister. She's launching a new initiative under our foundation. It's a fundraiser, but low-key. Mostly friends, board members, a few donors. Willa blinked. And you brought me because? I didn't want to go alone, he said, then added, and I thought you might enjoy seeing what the other side of my life looks like. The doors opened to a rooftop pavilion bathed in soft golden light. A string quartet played in the background as servers in black carried trays of appetizers and champagne. The crowd was understated but unmistakably affluent people who wore their wealth like a second skin. Nash introduced her to his sister, Leela, a woman with sleek hair and eyes that missed nothing. She took one long look at Willa, then smiled. I like her, she said to Nash before turning to Willa. If you're here willingly, you're already braver than most. The evening unfolded like a scene from a movie she didn't belong in. People asked where she'd come from, always politely, always with subtle curiosity, but Nash never left her side. He touched her back lightly as they moved through the crowd. He poured her a glass of wine without asking. He whispered dry commentary during a donor's speech that made her snort into her glass. At one point, she stepped away to the edge of the terrace. The city stretched beneath her, glittering and endless. Nash joined her a few minutes later, holding 2 small plates of dessert. "I rescued the last 2 lemon tarts," he said. "We may have to fight for them." She took one and bit into it, eyes widening. "This is ridiculous, I know. My sister curates pastry chefs like most people collect mugs." Willa leaned on the railing, licking a bit of icing from her thumb. "So this is the world you live in." "Part of it," he said. "The other part's just me, half asleep on a couch at 2 in the morning trying to convince a board not to implode." She turned. "Why did you really bring me?" He hesitated, then looked at her without flinching. "Because I don't want to be one of those men who only shows up with someone when it's convenient. I wanted you to see this side of my life. The good, the absurd, all of it." Willa tilted her head. "Why me?" "Because I met 100 people last week and couldn't remember a single name. Then I sat next to you and suddenly I couldn't think about anything else." She looked away, her throat tight. "I don't belong here," she said quietly. "I'm not like these people." "I know," he said. "That's the point." He touched her hand gently and she didn't pull away. The wind tugged at a strand of her hair and he brushed it back without thinking. "I'm not trying to impress you," he said. "I'm trying to be honest. You think I'm going to be scared off, I think," he said, voice low. "You're smart enough not to fall for someone who only wants you when it's easy." She looked up at him, really looked, and saw the tension in his jaw, the hesitation beneath the charm. "I'm not scared," she said, "but I'm not going to pretend this doesn't feel fast." "It is fast," he said, "but that doesn't make it wrong." Before she could answer, a small crash interrupted them. A tray had fallen nearby and a waiter knelt to gather the shards of glass. Nash stepped forward to help instinctively before a staff member waved him off. When he turned back, Willa was watching him. "Do you always do that?" she asked. "What?" "Jump in. Fix things." He hesitated. "Someone has to." She studied him. "You're not what I expected. Neither are you." The evening wound down and the crowd began to thin. Nash helped her into the car again, and this time when she looked over at him, he didn't look away. "I want to see you again," he said. "You're already seeing me." He smiled. "I mean beyond this. I want to know who you are when you're not an address I had delivered. I live above a bakery. I teach music theory to kids who'd rather be anywhere else. I eat cereal for dinner more often than I should." He leaned closer. "That's exactly what I want to know." She stared at him, pulse fluttering. "I don't want a fantasy," she said. "I want something real." "Then let's stop pretending," he said. "And start there." The car slipped into the night, the city unfolding around them, and Willa realized something terrifying and wonderful all at once. She wasn't alone anymore, and maybe, just maybe, she didn't want to be. Rain slicked the sidewalk outside the bakery as Willa locked the door behind her, her apron still dusted with powdered sugar, her hair pulled into a knot at the nape of her neck. It was well past closing, and the clatter of pans in the back had finally stopped. She'd offered to help clean up after her shift, needing something to do with her hands, something that wasn't thinking about Nash. It had been 5 days since the rooftop dinner. 5 days since he kissed the corner of her wrist before she stepped out of the car and told her he wanted real. And then, silence, no calls, no visits, no note wrapped around a necklace chain, nothing. She hadn't imagined any of it, she knew that. The way he looked at her, the way his voice slowed when he said her name, it had all been real, but the silence after had been real too. And louder with every passing day, as she stepped onto the wet pavement, her phone buzzed. Unknown number, she answered cautiously. "Hello," "Don't hang up," her breath caught. "Nash, I'm outside." She turned. A black SUV sat at the curb, its headlights off. The back door opened and he stepped out, no suit this time, just dark jeans and a charcoal sweater, his hair damp from the rain. "You've been gone for 5 days, she said as he approached. "I flew to Zurich the morning after the dinner," he said. "I didn't want to, it was a board emergency. I tried calling, but I didn't have your number. You sent me a diamond necklace," she said, folding her arms, "and didn't think to ask for my number," he exhaled. "I was arrogant enough to think I'd find another way. I tried the bakery, your old roommate, even Leela asked if I'd finally screwed something up for once." Willa stared at him, her heart pounding. "Why are you here now?" Because 5 days was 4 too many, he said. I haven't stopped thinking about you and I don't want to waste another hour pretending this is casual. She hesitated. You said you wanted real, but real means consistency, it means showing up. I know, and I didn't, that's on me. His voice dropped. But I'm here now because I need you to know that you weren't just someone I brought to a dinner to make the night easier. You were the first person I've met in years who made all of this. He gestured vaguely toward the skyline, feel like something I actually wanted to share. She swallowed. You didn't just disappear, Nash. You left me wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. I didn't mean to disappear, he said. But I'm not asking you to forget it. I'm asking you to let me make it right. Willa looked at him for a long time. Then she stepped under the awning out of the rain and motioned him inside. They sat at one of the bistro tables, the lights dim, the smell of cinnamon lingering in the air. You know, she said, I was halfway convinced you were just another rich guy playing at sincerity. Then I guess I'm lucky you're not the kind of woman who believes in halfway anything. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table. I've spent most of my life making decisions that were strategic, calculated. This was the first thing that caught me off guard in a long time. I don't need grand gestures, she said. I just need to trust that when you say something, you mean it. I didn't come with a speech, Willa. Just one truth. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She took it cautiously, unfolded it. It was a plain ticket, one way, her name printed at the top. Before you panic, hear me out, he said. Leela's launching a new branch of our foundation in Paris. It's a music education program. We need someone smart, grounded, someone who knows how to teach passion, not just theory. She stared at him. You want me to go to Paris? I want you to run the program, and I want to go with you, she blinked. You'd leave everything, not forever, but for now. Yes, Willa stood slowly, walking to the window. Rain streaked the glass, and the city glowed wet and golden. You're asking me to build something with you, she said. I'm asking you to start something, he said. Something honest, something neither of us controls. She turned. What if it doesn't work? I'm willing to bet it will, he said. But if it doesn't, we'll know we tried for something real. She crossed the room, stopped in front of him. I don't need Paris, she said. I just need to know you're not going to vanish the next time your board calls. I won't, he said. Not unless you're next to me on the plane. He reached into his coat pocket again and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. I'm not proposing, he said quickly, opening it to reveal a thin rose gold ring. This isn't that. It's a promise that I'm here, that I want this, that I'll show up every day. She stared at it, then at him. You really think we can do this? I think we already started. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the ring. When he slid it onto her finger, it fit perfectly. You'll need to give me 2 weeks' notice, she whispered. I'll give you 10 years if it means you'll come with me. She leaned in then, pressing her forehead to his. Rain tapped gently against the windows as his arms wrapped around her. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. She felt steady, seen, and deeply, impossibly loved. Because somehow, impossibly, the man who sat next to her at a wedding table she hadn't even belonged at had become the one who would never let her sit alone again. Willa stood on the balcony of the Paris apartment, her hands curled around a mug still warm from the morning's first cup of coffee. The Seine glittered below, its surface catching the soft blush of dawn. A breeze lifted the hem of her robe as she watched the city stretch awake, the golden rooftops bathed in light. Inside, the sound of a drawer opening and the soft clink of cutlery told her Nash was already in the kitchen. She turned as he appeared in the doorway, barefoot, hair tousled, a glass of orange juice in one hand, 2 plates balanced in the other. You made breakfast, she asked. I'm trying to master the art of French toast, Nash said, setting the plates on the small table by the window. This batch is marginally less terrible than the last. She joined him, lifting a fork. You know we live next door to a bakery that makes perfect croissants and actually has a Michelin star. But they don't look at me like you do when I burn things, he said. Desperation is not the same as admiration. He grinned, but this time it was quieter, more settled. They'd been in Paris for nearly 4 months now, and the rhythm between them had grown into something unmistakably solid. Willa ran the Foundation's arts program from a converted conservatory across the city, while Nash split his time between overseeing international operations and spending afternoons helping her design new curriculum for underfunded schools. They'd rented the apartment on a whim, a sunlit space with tall ceilings, a fireplace that worked only when it felt like it, and a view of the river that made every morning feel like a painting. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. As Willa poured another cup of coffee, Nash checked his watch. "Leela's arriving at 11, he said. "She's bringing the finalized donor list. Apparently someone from the Ministry of Culture is coming to Friday's showcase." Willa nodded. "Let her know the kids are ready." "They've been rehearsing like something big's on the line." "There is," Nash said, folding a napkin beside her plate. "You've built something that matters here." She looked at him, her face softening. "We did." He reached across the table and took her hand. "You know what I realized the other day?" "What?" "You haven't sat alone at a table once since we got here." She stared at him, quiet for a long moment. "I haven't felt alone once since we left New York." Later that afternoon, Willa walked through the rehearsal hall, watching the kids practice intently for the showcase. Music filled the space, a blend of cello and piano, the room echoing with sound and possibility. She paused beside one of her students, offering a note on posture, then stepped back as the group found their rhythm again. When the music swelled and fell into silence, she turned to find Nash leaning against the doorframe. He nodded toward the room. "They're different now," he said. "They believe in themselves," she replied. "That changes everything." On the morning of the showcase, Willa stood backstage in a floor-length black dress, clipboard in hand, earpiece crackling with updates in French and English. The venue, a historic art salon near the Champs-Élysées, was packed with diplomats, donors, and high-profile guests, but her focus was entirely on the kids. Their nerves were high, but their talent was undeniable. As the final group took the stage, Nash stepped beside her. She didn't look at him, just spoke softly. "If they nail this last piece, I owe you dinner at that place you like on Rue Cleur. If they don't, I'll still take you." When the performance ended, the applause was thunderous. Willa blinked hard and stepped away, overwhelmed. She moved through the back corridor toward the side exit, needing a moment to breathe. Nash followed, catching up with her just outside. "You okay?" She exhaled. "I've never seen them like that. They looked like they belonged there." "You gave them that," he said. She turned to face him. "You made it possible." He reached into his jacket pocket and slowly pulled out a small, square box. Willa's breath caught. "No," she whispered. "Not here." He opened it anyway, revealing a ring, simple, elegant, a sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds set in rose gold. "You told me you didn't need grand gestures," he said. "But I wanted to ask you this when you weren't expecting it, when it felt like life, not theater." She stared at him, frozen. "I don't want a perfect story," he said. "I want every morning with you. The burnt toast, the missed trains, the long nights, and the music that never quite hits the same way twice. I want everything." She blinked, tears threatening. "You already have it," she whispered. He stepped forward, took her hand, and slipped the ring onto her finger. "Marry me." Not for the headlines, not because we fit into each other's lives, but because we made something new and it's worth fighting for. She flung her arms around him, burying her face in his shoulder. Yes. When they pulled apart, he kissed her slow, sure, the kind of kiss that closed every distance. The cheers from inside filtered out faintly, but neither of them turned. A few weeks later, in a sun-drenched chapel tucked into the hills of Provence, they stood beneath a canopy of lavender and said their vows. No photographers. No press. Just Leela, the students, and the few people who had walked beside them when everything was uncertain. Willa wore a pale gown that shimmered only when the light hit it right. Nash wore no tie. He promised her a life of honesty, of presence, of showing up even when it was hard. She promised him courage, laughter, and the kind of love that grew with time, not in spite of it. As they walked down the aisle hand in hand, the wind picked up slightly, catching the hem of her dress. She leaned into him and he pressed a kiss to her temple. They didn't rush. There was no need. The road ahead was theirs. And this time they were already home.